20-year-old Derek Comrie of Hartford County, Connecticut, attended a basketball game on the night of January 10th, 2006. While at the basketball game, Derek was handing out flyers for a party that he was going to be hosting in just a few days. A party that would never happen, because just hours later, Derek was sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's car at a stoplight. As the stoplight turned green, a man approached in a large black coat with a fur lining hoodie, tapped on the window, and shot Derek in the face with a shotgun. A clear planned hit, one that was successful for years. This case went cold because all police had was the fact that the man was seen wearing a black coat and had dreads and a lining, a fur lining on the hoodie. That's all they had. No one came forward to give them information, and it would take years and the use of something new running through the prison system, something that had been adopted during the Iraq War, believe it or not. Do you guys remember those decks of playing cards with Iraq's Most Wanted on them? Decks of playing cards that were passed around to soldiers fighting in Iraq that had, as I said, Iraq's Most Wanted, different criminals, different people that were wanted as a part of Saddam Hussein's crew over in Iraq. Those cards were so successful because soldiers used them and stared at them all day when they were back at the base playing cards with their friends, and they were able to locate and take out many of those people in those decks of cards. They were so successful that states within the U.S. began adopting the same concept and began to print out decks of cards with cold case files on them and handing them out to inmates within prison, selling them as commissary. That kind of started happening, in the mid to late 2000s. And one of the states that would end up adopting it started in Florida. Well, one of the states that would end up adopting it in 2010, at the beginning of 2010, would be Connecticut. And the first edition deck of cards in Connecticut, passed around to inmates, would feature Derek Comrie's face and the details of his murder, a murder that had been cold now for 5 years to this point. And he would be featured on the 9 of clubs within this deck of cards. And it would only take till the end of that year, the end of 2010, before authorities would receive a tip that would end up catching the killer. They received a tip from someone who had been playing with those cards while in prison in Connecticut. And, he realized that he had heard about this murder from a fellow inmate who had been bragging about shooting Derek Comrie. He called the free hotline number and basically told him what he knew. And this tipster would implicate a man, 22-year-old Hector Torres, who was already in prison serving a 9-year sentence for stabbing 2 men in Manchester in 2009. A dangerous man indeed. And police would learn more about Torres and the fact that he and Derek Comrie had an ongoing dispute prior to the shooting. And in fact, Derek had even allegedly shot and wounded Torres 2 years before Torres enacted his revenge. So he had this ongoing feud. Derek had shot him, and now Torres had got the final say. And when Torres found out that Comrie was at the basketball game on that night, he had planned this hit. He had hid a shotgun in the bushes, and he was working with a couple of other people, some of his friends, to keep an eye on Derek and see what car he got into when he left the basketball game. And they actually waited for that light to turn green so that the car would be illuminated enough for Torres to be able to make sure that it was in fact Derek in that passenger seat when he approached. And he may very well have gotten away with this murder had it not been for these playing cards. And following capturing Torres for this, he didn't have to go far, he was already in prison, but slapping charges on him for that, they would also learn about another murder that Hector had committed, that of Luis Berto Benitez, 28-year-old of East Hartford, who was fatally shot in an ambush in the parking lot of a gas station in Hartford around 1:45 a.m. on December 7th, 2009. Benitez had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to his chest and abdomen and underwent numerous surgeries before finally dying 3 months after he was shot on March 14th, 2010. So for the 2 murders, Hector would be sentenced to 37 years in prison to be run concurrent with the 9-year sentence for stabbings that he had already been in prison for. Who would have thought? A deck of cards. And this isn't the first time. Actually, the murder I was going to focus on this week for the 5-Minute Murder Show was that of a different murder that the deck of cards had solved in a different state. I believe the case was in Florida. But these cards they're being adopted in more and more states. It's not something I was aware of, but now I am, and hopefully I'm making you guys aware of it. It's a pretty interesting concept and just one of the many ways that law enforcement and the correctional system uses to capture criminals. Obviously we have the adoption of advanced DNA and genealogy and all of that. But like these old school methods of playing cards, we know that inmates have a lot of downtime while they're in prison. You know, they're playing cards. You know, somewhere Randy Kraft in San Quentin is playing card games right now. Most likely, unfortunately, he's not dead yet, but they have a lot of time and they talk a lot. And some guys brag about killing people. And this guy, Hector Torres, bragged to the wrong person who ratted him out. And now this case is solved. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. See you guys next week.
You hush your mouth, boy.